In a quiet animal shelter, filled with abandoned souls longing for love, something extraordinary was about to happen. One ordinary afternoon, a man named Jake walked into the shelter, just looking to help. He had no idea his life was about to change forever. As he strolled past the kennels, looking at the sad, lonely dogs behind the metal bars, something caught his attention. A pit bull, trembling, with tears welling in its deep, soulful eyes. The dog, Bruno, wasn't barking or growling like the others. Instead, he just stared at Jake, his eyes full of something that felt like recognition. And then he let out a heartbreaking whimper. Why was this dog crying? Did he know Jake? Or was there a deeper story hidden behind those sad eyes? Jake felt a strange pull in his heart, but he had no idea that uncovering Bruno's past would lead to a discovery so emotional, it would bring tears to his eyes. But before we continue, if you love stories about second chances and unconditional love, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Jake had never been to an animal shelter before. He had always loved dogs, but after a personal tragedy, he never thought he'd be ready to open his heart again. The shelter was a small, overcrowded place, filled with dogs of all breeds, barking, whining, and begging for attention. The smell of disinfectant and damp fur filled the air, and the walls echoed with both hope and sorrow. As he walked past rows of kennels, his eyes scanned the desperate faces looking back at him. But it was Bruno, the crying pit bull, that made him stop in his tracks. Bruno wasn't aggressive, nor did he jump excitedly like the others. Instead, he just sat there, his tail barely wagging, his body stiff, his eyes locked onto Jake. And then, just as Jake took a step closer, Bruno whimpered. Not just any whimper. A deep, painful, sorrowful cry. It was as if he was pleading, as if he had been waiting for someone. And something inside Jake told him this wasn't a normal reaction. The shelter worker, Megan, noticed Jake's confusion. He never reacts like this to anyone, she said, looking just as surprised as Jake. Do you know this dog? Jake asked. Megan shook her head. Not that I know of. But Bruno's story is a sad one. Jake's heart pounded. He had to know more. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to learn. Megan led Jake to a small office and pulled out a worn-out file from a cabinet. Bruno has been here for over a year, she explained. He was found abandoned on the side of the road. No tags, no microchip. Just lost. Jake stared at the old photos in the file. Bruno looked even sadder back then. Thin, weak, alone. We tried everything to find his owner, but no one ever came. Megan sighed. He never really connected with anyone. Until now. Jake looked back at the kennel. Bruno was still staring at him, his eyes pleading, his body pressed against the bars. Something inside Jake told him this wasn't just a coincidence. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Bruno, about the pain in his eyes, about that whimper. So the next morning, he made a decision. He had to go back. When Jake arrived at the shelter, Bruno's reaction was even more shocking. The moment he stepped inside, Bruno started barking. Not aggressively, but desperately. His tail wagged wildly, and he started pacing in circles, whining like he couldn't contain his excitement. I've never seen him like this, Megan said, wide-eyed. Jake knelt down by the kennel, reaching his hand through the bars. Bruno licked his fingers, his body shaking with emotion. It was almost as if he was welcoming Jake home. Jake took a deep breath. I want to take him outside. Megan agreed, and as soon as the gate opened, Bruno leaped into Jake's arms. Felt like a reunion, but that didn't make sense. Jake ran his fingers through Bruno's fur, and that's when he felt something. A faint scar near Bruno's neck. And suddenly, memories came flooding back. A childhood dog, a best friend, a tragic accident, and a loss that had haunted Jake for years. Could it be? Jake's heart raced. Megan, I think I know this dog. Jake sat down with Megan, his voice trembling. Years ago, when I was a teenager, I had a pit bull named Max. He was my best friend. But one day, during a road trip, we had a car accident. I was injured. And when I woke up, Max was gone. His voice broke. We searched for weeks, months, but we never found him. Megan's eyes widened. You think Bruno is Max? Jake looked at Bruno, now curled up by his feet, his eyes filled with something Jake hadn't seen in years. Recognition. I need to know, Jake whispered. Megan suggested a DNA test. It was the only way to be sure. The wait was agonizing. But when the results finally came back, Jake's world shattered. It was a match. Bruno was Max, his lost best friend. Jake broke down, tears streaming down his face. You waited for me, buddy. All these years, and for the first time in forever, Bruno Max wagged his tail with pure joy. Jake knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to let Bruno know Max spend another night alone. The adoption papers were signed within hours, and as Jake led Max out of the shelter, the staff watched with teary eyes. Looks like he finally found his way home, Megan whispered. At home, Jake set up a warm bed for Max, but he didn't need it. That night, Max curled up beside Jake on the couch, just like old times. It was as if no time had passed. And in that moment, Jake realized something profound. Love never truly fades. No matter how many years, no matter how much distance, true love always finds its way back. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories of love, loyalty, and second chances. Because sometimes the most unexpected reunions are the ones that remind us what love is really about.